What fat do you cook with? Does it matter? Let's talk about it. I might just change your mind. The first decision you want to make when you're choosing a fat is why. Like, what am I trying to accomplish? And if I'm trying to cook with really high heat, I might choose my fat, a clarified butter or avocado oil for really high heat. If I want to deep fry with it, I might choose a different fat for that. If I want the flavor, I might choose an oil for its flavor rather than its heat or cooking conductivity. And so for us, we're making a pie. And in a pie, what fats would you typically use? Well, you can use anything that's on this table. And let's talk about each one individually. So lard. When you use lard, lard has a much higher melting point. And so when you put it into your dough to make a pie, it's gonna make it easier to work with. And because it has a higher melting point, that means when you go in the oven, you start baking the crust, because it's a higher heat, it will stay in the crust longer and won't melt out for you. But through that process, being able to bake it with that higher heat, then it'll give you a flakier, crispier crust. But it might make it taste a little bit like pork because it is a pork-based lard. And so it does have good qualities depending on what you're using it for. Then we have butter. So there's different types of butter. And I would suggest, depending on what your end goal is, that you choose your butter for what you like. If you're just eating butter and spreading on bread, well, any high-fat butter is good for that. And so there are purposes for a lower fat butter. The percentage is not much different, but if you're making a pie, if you're going to use butter, you might as well go with a nicer quality butter, which has a higher fat content and will give you that much better, richer flavor when you're done. And so when it comes to butter, the things you need to know are butter gets soft really quickly. It has a much lower melting point, so it's harder to work with, but it does give you a lot of flavor. What makes butter different from the other fats is that butter is made up of 3 parts. You have your milk solids, your fat, and your water. Whereas like lard or the oil or the Crisco, those are all just solid fat. But butter having all 3 parts, that means when your crust starts baking, the water will turn to steam and it helps create a flakier crust because the steam will start pushing apart the layers of your crust. And so that's a good thing that butter does, but working with butter, it makes it a little bit more difficult because of its lower melting point. That means sometimes if you put it in the fridge too long when you're working on your dough, it might get too hard and you have to let it warm up. Or when you're working with your dough on the table, it might get too warm and you have to put it in the fridge to cool it down. And so those are some of the complexities that come with it. But as far as superior flavor and flakiness, butter is probably a top-notch choice if that's what you're looking for. Now, if you're looking for a vegan option, you can use oil or you can use shortening. These are both, this is a fruit. A lot of people think that's different, but olive oil is a fruit, and the Crisco or shortening is made from vegetable oils. And so they both work great because the shortening is in the same realm with the lard, that these two have a higher melting point, so they're going to give you a flakier crust. But Crisco or shortening will not give you flavor. There's really no flavor to this. It almost has no flavor at all. And so if you're looking for flakiness, that's wonderful. But if you want to impart some flavor, you might think about mixing. You can mix a little bit of this and butter together, so it gives you a little bit more stability when you're working with it, but also gives you the flavor of butter in the end. Or you can go solid butter. You can mix and match really any of these to get to an end result in your pie crust. Now, oil, the thing you would want to know about oil when you're using it is, again, it can be a vegan option if that's what you're looking for, but because it's made from a fruit, your oils do go bad. And so the oils in your cabinet, you want to look at the date. Most olive oils, if they're over 6 months old, they're probably not at their peak peak flavor. And if you've had it for a year or more, it really would be considered rancid. It would be considered bad about that point because fruits do go bad over time. And that's one thing that we probably don't think a lot about when we're using our oils for cooking or baking and such, is to know where it came from and to know its expiration date, because olive oil has the same complexities as other things, as far as like coffee and wine. Depending on where the grapes are grown, it will have different flavor profiles. And so if you want to use something like this, you want to taste it first so that you know what you're getting into before you continue down that path.